Should Powell punch back? Should Jay Powell make comments today off the cuff to go after the president, or just take the body blow and kind of walk off?
Well, it's interesting. Actually, I'm going to lunch with him in a few hours. My view is
Trump
the best
or Powell?
For Powell. He was up in New York today, and I wrote a book several years ago that talked about relationships between Fed chairmen and presidents over the years. And I have found, and most presidents have found, that the wise course of action for the president is to say as little as possible about what the Fed is doing and about the people on the Federal Reserve Open Market Committee or on the board. Let them do their job, and by and large, the Fed has been very, very credible and very, very effective over the years. But the best thing is for presidents to do their business and let the Fed do their business.
But that's obviously not what's happening here, Bob.
Well, it's not what's happening here, but I think if he were to reflect a little bit on how other presidents have handled this, he would come to the conclusion that that's the best course of action for the country, the best course of action for the president. And the Fed, by and large, is independent, and it was made independent by those who created it about 100 years ago, because independence was considered critical to their ability to act effectively. And it is today.
What advice would you give to Jay Powell when you see him today? What would you say? Punch back or just ignore it and move on?
Say as little as you can and do your job effectively. I think Jay is a very credible guy in the financial markets, and I think the financial markets would feel very good about Powell being given as much independence as he deserves, which is total independence to run the Fed the way he and other members of the Fed believe it should be run. And we shouldn't forget that he is not the only one on the Open Market Committee or on the board of the Federal Reserve System. They're regional governors, regional presidents, and they're members of the board in Washington, and they make decisions collectively. It's not just Jay Powell. It's a number of people, Jay at the top, but others working with him, and by and large, it was meant to work that way, with a number of people contributing to whatever outcomes there are on the Open Market Committee or on many other things.
Will the United States and China have a trade breakthrough at the G20 meeting in Argentina tomorrow?
Well, I hope so. I was in China for 10 days, and the problem is that these tensions have been building over a period of time, and they're not helpful to China or the U.S., really. I mean, there's certainly a lot of issues to deal with respect to China, but tough negotiations does not necessarily require confrontation. That is, I think, something that can be avoided. There needs to be a lot of conversation and a lot of negotiations and a lot of candid talk about what's going on intellectual property and other things in order to reach agreements in those areas. But avoiding a confrontation and escalating tariffs and other kinds of things can be, I think, and should be the right course of action. The U.S. can certainly candidly express its views, as it has done, but I think the escalating tariffs that we're now seeing is probably not going to, in the long run,
the president is coming at this clearly with the view that China needs us more than we need them from an economic perspective. Do you agree with that? Who needs who more?
Well, it's certainly true that China is very dependent on our market for a number of things, more perhaps than we're dependent on the Chinese market. But the fact is that both sides would be, and over time, are going to be disrupted if you get into an escalating tariff battle or you get into major restrictions on investment. It seems to be the case now. So China may be affected somewhat more than we, just because it's somewhat more dependent on our markets. But a lot of American companies are also dependent on intermediate goods from China. There's a lot of interaction between Chinese and American companies. So both sides would be hurt, and of course American consumers as well. There clearly are issues, and I don't look for a breakthrough, a dramatic breakthrough in Buenos Aires, but I do think there are ways of addressing this in a positive way, which is to say both leaders put their emphasis on a process that addresses intellectual property issues, trade secrets issues, investment issues, working more effectively to resolve bilateral differences, and working more effectively to deal with issues in the World Trade Organization. These are things that do deserve high-level consideration and high-level negotiations and genuine progress. And negotiations with an impact are important. Breakthroughs are probably unlikely in one meeting over dinner in Buenos Aires.
Yeah,